Welcome everybody to the Amy Noel YouTube channel. This morning, I am so grateful that Carolyn Bateman is here with us, and she's from Liverpool, England. And Carolyn, can you go ahead and tell us what you do?
I call myself a learning technology consultant, but I kind of made it up myself. So I don't know if such a thing really exists, but I think I was going to an SEN seminar and had to say what I was, and that's what I came up with.
Wonderful. And tell us about your YouTube channel that you made.
I found really, really helpful stuff to pass on to other people. And I was just trying to find the most efficient way of doing it. I cannot know what I know and not pass it on. And because I'm dyslexic, writing lots and lots of text to explain it, it would just take me forever. My audience are dyslexic. When I want to know how to do something, I just go onto YouTube and say, how do you? And then I look at the shortest video and watch that. So It just makes sense, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do the same thing. And I love your focus on technology in your YouTube channel.
Yeah.
So can you tell us how many children do you have and how many of them are dyslexic?
I have 3 kids and they're all dyslexic. I'm absolutely sure that my husband and I are dyslexic too. I've never been diagnosed, but that's because I'm tight and there's no benefit from spending £600 on getting a diagnosis, but I am so obviously dyslexic, it's untrue. I do not know how I got through school without it ever being mentioned. I did very well academically, but I can't spell, very disorganized, don't know my left from my right. But I think my strengths were very strong. And when I was at school, which was a long time ago, nobody cared that much about how I spelled. So I wasn't ever marked down for spelling badly.
Yeah, that's interesting. And in my family too, all 5 of my children are dyslexic. And I think it's because there's a family history of dyslexia on my husband's side and my side.
Right.
So together,
And I'm told that dyslexics often attract dyslexics because neither of us, until all our children were really struggling at school, and then I worked out that they were dyslexic. And as I looked at all the descriptions, I thought, it's me and it's Paul. Until then, we had no idea.
Yeah, I myself, I'm not dyslexic, but I do have ADHD, but my grandfather is dyslexic. So you found out that your children were dyslexic when they started struggling in school?
Yeah. I remember a mum of my son. So I've got girl, boy, girl. And my husband and I are both working class kids made good through education. So we both did really well academically. And I think we thought that our offspring would be really good. And we just sent them to the local state school. We just thought that's what we did. They'll be fine. And my eldest just didn't get on that well at school. I just thought, well, okay, not everyone's academic, no problem. And then my second child really struggled at school. And another mum said to me, do you think our sons might be dyslexic? Both of our kids were on the remedial table. They don't call it that, but that's what it was. And I went to the teacher, and the teacher was the Senko in the school. That's a special needs coordinator. And I said, could my son be dyslexic? And he was in her class at school. And she said, definitely not. And because she told me definitely not, I trusted her. And this other mum kept saying to me, I'm sure our children are dyslexic. And I used to kind of roll my eyes and think, what is wrong? Because I live in London now, and in the north we're a bit more basic, a bit more. And I was saying, why have our children got to have an ism? It's just not very good at school. And then she had her child tested and he was dyslexic. So I thought, ooh. So then I had my son tested and he was off the scale dyslexic. So how the Senko did not pick it up when he'd been in her class a year, I do not know. And she was doing her best, but you don't know what you don't know.
And I think it shows the lack of awareness of dyslexia. For one thing, you didn't even know, and you are dyslexic, and the teacher didn't pick it up, and Yeah.
And she had 4 dyslexic sons. She was the Senko because she had dyslexia in the family and she had an interest in it. And she said, you know, he doesn't like reading, but he's not dyslexic. And I think what a little bit of knowledge can be really dangerous, because sometimes when people know a dyslexic, they think that's how all dyslexics are, rather than realizing, my goodness, you know, everybody's different. Every dyslexic is different. And within our family of 5, we have completely different traits. We have completely different strengths and weaknesses. It's shocking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's important to know. So, do your children have any other comorbid diagnoses?
Oh, I'm sure they do, but the way we did the diagnosis here, dyslexia was the biggie. It was the one that we needed to have a label so we could get the reasonable adjustments. I'm convinced there's lots of other things, you know, ADS, sensory, dyspraxia, but I don't have that written. In fact, I have dyspraxia for my son, who is the most coordinated kid ever, but he couldn't hold a pencil at all. So yes, I do, but I don't have a formal diagnosis. I just kind of recognize, because I teach a lot of children now, I think, yeah.
What is ADS?
So I've got it the wrong way around, or autistic spectrum disorder, ASD.
Oh, okay.
I said it the wrong way around.
Okay. You are dyslexic. I'm just kidding. So can you share with us what you did for your kids that was helpful, and what you found as you were doing it? Well, what was not helpful, and then what did you find that is very good for children with dyslexia?
I can talk a lot about what isn't helpful. I have girl, boy, girl, dyslexic, profoundly dyslexic. So my son was the person that I concentrated on the most, because the girls weren't doing well, but they weren't doing really badly. Whereas my son really worried me, because I thought, well, he's never going to learn to read. You know, it really frightened me how he just couldn't do the basics. And I think he managed to fool an awful lot of teachers into thinking he wasn't as dyslexic as he was, because he is incredibly bright. And so teachers used to speak to me like I was the most neurotic, hypersensitive mum. And I know that I'm not. I am the most, you know, get on with it, I don't care. But I could just see that my son was completely failing in education. And if I didn't advocate for him, there was no way. So I'd say, what can I do to help him to read? And they'd say, oh, Mrs. Bateman, your son can read. He can't. I know he can't. And he was just very good at remembering what they said and asking the boy next to him to read for him. And so I took it on myself that I would teach my son to read. My husband was in denial, like there's nothing wrong with my son. I was never very good at reading, and look at me, I got a first-class degree and every prize going. And so he was in denial big time. And so I made it my mission to help my son read, and I became his enemy, and we were on opposite sides. And if I had my time again, I would make the school be the person that pushed him, and I would be the helper, not the person that pushed him. And I think only now that he's 18 are we starting to get a good relationship again. And we haven't got the best relationship, but he loves his dad. But I don't think, and we often laugh, he's never forgiven me for forcing him to read. And because he hated it, and because he's bright, he had convinced himself, I do not need to learn to read. I will be fine through life. Leave me alone. And we did toe by toe together. And to say our house was like a battle zone, it was awful. And in the end, I thought I'd rather have a relationship with my son than teach him to read. And so I started to step back. So that was the biggest mistake I made. You've always got to be on your kid's side, not on the opposite side. I think The other huge mistake I made, which I've created an ebook about and I've said on video, is because all my kids were very poor readers, I used every opportunity of reading to teach them to read, and I did not help them develop a love of reading. We didn't just enjoy it and me read to them or listen to, because I'm not a great reader out loud, but listen to audiobooks together. It was right, sound it out.
Yeah.
So I'd read a page and it would flow, and then they'd read a page and it would go really slow. And when they couldn't find a word, I would say, spell it out. So they hated reading. So they didn't develop a love of reading. And finding audiobooks was just really brilliant for my eldest daughter, and she developed a real love of reading and went on to study literature, got 100% in her English GCSE, which is like English literature, so she went from being dreadful to really good, and went on and did A-level, but she did not read a chapter book till she was about 12. And all the classmates were doing it when they were about 6 or 7. So I think not instilling a love of reading, not being on their team, that was it. And then what I think I did well is I really went after technology to help them. My background is technology. And I think one of the reasons I didn't work out I was dyslexic was I worked in the IT industry. And I didn't have to write much. I just presented, and I configured things. And so not being able to spell wasn't really a problem. And I just figured I am going to find out all the best tech for my kids. So that's one thing I think I did well. And the other thing was working out what they were good at and investing in it. Because like my son, who really, really struggles, even now with reading, we worked out he was very good at maths. And so the temptation would be to invest our money in tutors to help him with his reading and his spelling and his comprehension, which, we needed to do. But then just because he was naturally gifted at maths, just leave that. And I thought, no, I'm going to push him on the maths, and I couldn't help him because I'm not that good at maths. But and I did it on the cheap. I do everything on the cheap. I got a sixth form student who went to a local school who was really good at maths to come and do maths with him once a week. And so he went from being, one of the best in the class at maths to off the scale good. And he did his GCSE, that's the exam we do at 16, when he was 2 years before, and he got A star. And that really helps his confidence.
Yes.
And I think as a parent, and as adults in the lives of dyslexics, not just parents, teachers, our job is to help them have self-esteem by the end of the time they finish school. Because every day they go to school that is not designed to help them. And every day they compare themselves to their peers and feel worthless. And so we've got to help build their confidence any way we can. And I think that's one of the things that really helped my son, because he knew, well, I'm rubbish at English, but I'll beat all of you at maths. And he did.
Yeah, that's really true. I agree with that.
And one more.
Yeah.
Is find out about access arrangements. That's what we call them in the UK.
And what are those?
So the reasonable adjustments that you can have in exams, because I was very lucky that my son ended up going to, it's not quite a special school, but, really good with dyslexia. And they told me that he needed a reader and a scribe. And I was really like, no. I don't want him to have a reader and a scribe, because in the real world, you don't have people writing for you and reading for you. I think he'll be lazy and he won't push through. And this was in a parent teachers conference, and I was in a room full of lots of other parents and teachers talking. And the teacher said to me, Mrs. Bateman, your son is many things, but he's not lazy. He works really hard. And I just burst out crying. Of all these other people, because I realized that I was too hard on him, and I was forever thinking he's too lazy. I cry now thinking about it. And I'm so grateful that school opened my eyes to the fact that he needs additional support. And once he got it, he went from getting D, 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 A in maths, D, 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 to getting A, B, A. It
Wow.
was amazingly different. And he's now predicted to get 3 A stars in his A levels and go to university to study pure maths. But if that teacher hadn't told me what he needed, he'd have carried on getting D, 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 A, D, 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 and he'd have just given up on education. Because if you work hard for an exam and you get rubbish marks, you think, well, I'm stupid, or academia is not for me. Wouldn't be going to do pure maths. And he's the sort of kid who could work in the intelligence agency, he could work in quantum physics, he can contribute to society because he got the reasonable adjustments in place, and his skills aren't now going to be wasted. And I think it's really worth doing research to make sure that your children get the right access arrangements.
Yes. So access arrangements, that word means those reasonable adjustments.
Yeah. So in the UK, they might be extra time, being able to be a laptop user, to type, to have a reader, a scribe, to have rest breaks. They all make a big difference.
Yeah. Yeah. And here we call them accommodations and modifications. So, yeah. And what advice do you give to parents, or what programs do you help parents use with their kids now that you know so much?
Well, one of the reasons why I created the YouTube channel is there isn't a quick answer to that, because there's just so much brilliant technology. So it depends very much on the needs of the child, the budget of the family, what the family already have, the age of the child. So there's so much. But if I was just to think about it, for younger children, I think using intervention solutions technology is really good. It's much better than being taught by your mum, because the tutor, the computer's the tutor, as opposed to your mum, and your mum is the helper when you can't do it, which I think is better. And plus, in order to embed a lot of the phonics, they need a lot of repetition, and in technology they gamify it so it's more fun and it's more bearable, and they're very reasonably priced solutions. Plus they're structured, so they take them through the way they need to go to build their knowledge. And as a parent who wasn't trained as a dyslexia tutor, I needed that. I also think listening to books is just brilliant. It's just absolutely brilliant. Even though they're not improving their decoding skills, they're learning so much else about the world, about sentence structure, about vocabulary. So listening to books and enjoying them together, fantastic. So they're the things that I would say for younger children. As they get older, I think listening to electronic textbooks, so they, if children are struggling to read for pleasure, then reading to learn is really, really hard. So getting them to listen to books, electronic textbooks, you can see on the screen, you can listen at the same time, you can change the font to be a dyslexia-friendly font, maybe you can change the background, maybe you can use a ruler. Anything we can do to make reading easier is helpful, and it helps in every subject across the curriculum. So that's a biggie. I think touch typing, I think is the most helpful skill my children learned, because once you can touch type, it opens up so many other technologies that can really, really help you. But if you can't touch type, you can't use them. So I teach a course. I do an awful lot for free, but the one way I do earn income is I teach a touch typing course, but it's not just touch typing. I call it touch typing for academic success. So at the same time as teaching kids to touch type, I teach them about all the technologies that they can use once they can touch type, and how it will help them get better grades. And I'm talking, as soon as you finish this course, you will type your homework and you will get better grades. And kids go from thinking, I don't want to, you can't make me, to thinking, really? You mean I could do that easier, and I could get, really? And they do the practice and they get better grades because they learned to touch type.
Wow. How do people access that program?
Well, I don't have a program. I teach a course, and in my course, I use lots of different programs because that's a way of just keeping it different, because it's so boring learning to touch type, which is why the vast majority of dyslexic teens do not type well, even though every assessor says you should learn to touch type, and there are free that teach yourself typing solutions all over the place, or very reasonably priced ones, and yet no one can type. And I think the problem is the motivation. I can't be bothered. So if you can see, well, because it will really, really help you. But what I would say is, when I teach touch typing, it's much easier to teach a 14 or 15-year-old from a dexterity point of view than it is a 9, 10, 11-year-old. But in between being 10 and 15, the peer pressure comes in, and maybe the whole well, I'm never going to do well at school anyway, so what's the point? So dexterity wise, it's much easier to teach the older students, but from an attitude and motivation point of view, it's much easier to teach the younger students when they still believe they can achieve. And then if they go into secondary school with typing as their normal way of working, they're far more likely to be able to have that as a reasonable adjustment in their exams. So I always think once you start doing formal exams, you haven't got time to learn to touch type. You've got to do it sooner.
So if people want to take your course, how would they access that?
Oh, it's all on my website. In fact, I've just updated it. For I only tend to teach them in the holidays, so the summer holidays or the Easter holidays, because I think it's really unfair to expect children who have been at school all day, finding it hard, doing homework, to then do typing practice. And if they don't practice, then the course is a waste of time. They don't get the automaticity and the muscle memory. So I only tend to teach them at the beginning of long school holidays. And then it's a dual course. So it starts off with me actually teaching and checking they're using the right fingers. So they have webcams pointing to their fingers. And then we have a distance learning where I set them work to do. And then once a week, I have a webinar with them where I say, oh, like, you've really improved. You've gone up 5 words per minute. Oh, you've not done so well. So, and they're only competing against themselves, because some people find touch typing really easy and some find it really difficult. And I explained that at the beginning. It's like some people can sing, some people can run. It's just the way it is. So we're always just trying to improve our own our own words per minute, or our own accuracy. And I send parents a little report to say what they've done. So between the parents knowing and talking to me and me setting them work, then they really progress over the holiday. And the idea is by the end of the holiday, they'll be capable of typing their homework and getting better grades.
And how long is the course?
I tend to be flexible, but when I just run a generic course, it's 4 days, 3.5 hours a day, and then the next 5 weeks, and they can do whatever they want, and we just meet once a week. But I suggest they practice 20 minutes a day. Some kids, just about manage that, don't even manage that. But because I set up competitions and use really fun games, some mums say to me, I can't believe how much practice they did, because they've gamified it. And so they're enjoying it. But that's not all of them. Some of them just do the bare minimum. And if they don't attend the webinars, then they don't tend to practice. They need that accountability, because there's so many other fun things they could be doing.
Right. And that 3.5 hours in those first 4 days, is that directly with you on?
Yeah. It's, as I say, I send out every child has a keyboard that I send out that is specially designed so they can't cheat and they know which finger to use. And I send out a webcam. And so when they're doing their practice, I have the webcam aimed at their fingers, and I just look, and it's so much easier than when I used to do it face to face. So I decided to go remote before the pandemic, and I look and I'll say, "Ooh, Johnny, why are you doing that with your left hand? And they don't get away with anything. Whereas I think in the past, they could just go and play a little video game and I wouldn't realize because they were doing, you know, their fingers were doing that. But I can really see what they're doing now. So they will do some typing and we'll get baseline words per minute and accuracy. And then I will teach them a lesson of, right, once you can type, why not use this technology? And then they'll do some more typing. And then it's like, okay, now you can do that. You can do this to get higher marks. So it's a mix of the two things, how to use technology and typing. And I think by teaching them together, these children get some intrinsic motivation that they want to be good typists and therefore they'll practice. Rather than, oh, my mum says I've got to, or oh, they'll buy me this Xbox game if I do. They see the benefit for themselves. Although I still believe in bribes.
Yeah, I think incentives, I call them incentives. That's a nice word for it.
Yeah,
it's very powerful. But yeah, that's an ingenious course that you have. I like that. Well, let's end with this question. How has having children with dyslexia been a blessing for you?
I could answer how it's been a curse. I think an awful lot of why I do what I do is because I had such a hard time for a long time. And I know how hard it is to be the parent of kids that are really failing at school and how isolated you feel and how hopeless you feel. And that makes you make really bad parenting decisions. And I did all of that. So I found it really, really hard. The good thing now with my girls, not my boy, is they need my help more when they're 16, 17 and 18 than they would have done if they weren't dyslexic. And so we work together and we're very much probably closer now than if they weren't dyslexic because they wouldn't need my help. But you know, for a long time, I didn't see any plus side at all. I just found it really hard, which is why I try to pass on what works to other parents. And I don't want to make light of it because if parents are finding it really hard and someone says, oh, it's great. And because of that, my son loves working with me. No, my son, all my kids hated working with me. They hated it. They were like, Mum, you're my mum. You're not my teacher. Go away.
I appreciate your honesty. Yeah.
Making me do it in the evening. And so no, I didn't enjoy it at all. And I mean, my son still laughs at me now. He says, oh, if only you taught me to read earlier, I'd be brilliant now, Mum. And then I say, when you've got dyslexic children, you'll be bringing and asking for me my help. And he says, oh no, I'm going to be much better than you were.
So what do you think your children's dyslexic gifts are?
Oh, my son is a maths genius. He is just really, really good at maths. And I'm really grateful we were able to push him on that. And so he knows that he's good at it because for a long time, he wasn't on top table for maths because they judged his maths ability by his ability to read, which was very my eldest is just the most brilliant writer. I mean, it's hard to believe because she is really dyslexic, but the quality of what she writes is beautiful. She doesn't necessarily spell or put punctuation in. She does now, she's 20. But even when she didn't, the quality of what she wrote was far beyond anything I could write. And my youngest, I don't know what her dyslexic strength is. She's not really bad at anything. She's just, you know, she can't spell very well. But other than that, she does okay with most things. I'm sure we'll find her strength coming up, but she doesn't really need that strength because she's not really struggling at anything either. Well,
Caroline, it's been a pleasure talking with you, getting to know you a little bit. And thank you for sharing your experience and also your channel and your resources with us. So thank you.
It's my pleasure. And I think you're amazing. I said before we started, the fact that you're doing all this with 5 children at the ages they are, I only started helping other people once all mine was sorted because it took every bit of energy I had just to help them get through the day. So well done you doing this. I really admire you for doing it.
Thank you. And like I told you, I can't do it without the Lord. And all of this is helping me help my kids. So
Brilliant. They're lucky to have you.
thank you. Everybody, thank you for watching. If you haven't already, please subscribe and check out Carolyn Bateman's channel. Your channel is called Achieve Now, correct? So I'll put a link to that in the description and her website. And we'll see you next time.
Brilliant.
Thank you, Carolyn.
Bye-bye.